Hello, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Ryobi RY40470VNM 40v Brushless Blower. So let's get started. Starting at the rear of the blower, we have the air intake guard. Next we have the handle securement knob, the 40v battery slot, and then we have the adjustable handle, the variable speed trigger, and the turbo button. Moving further up, we have the securement latch for the blower tube as well as the blower tube. There are no extension tubes available for this blower. Now here are some videos to show you how it looks and how it sounds in operation. Okay, by now you've probably heard enough of the blower, so let's talk a little bit about the blower and the tests. So right now it's the beginning of August, and there aren't a whole lot of leaves falling from the trees. If you have trees that leaves can fall from, we really don't. So what I went ahead and did is I took the mower that I previously reviewed and I did a whole bunch of mowing, and I got about 8.5 bags worth of mulch and grass clippings, and I put them in an empty section of the horse corral so I'd have a flat, even surface to work with. Of course, the peanut section was watching me the whole time and they wanted the grass clippings for themselves, but I needed to make a video, so they didn't get them. The grass clippings ranged from dry and brittle to wet and soggy, and so it was very interesting to see just how well the blower performed. If you pull the trigger in just a little bit, it activates the lower power settings, and this blower had plenty of power even on the lowest setting to blow around the light brittle grass, even if it was in a little bit of a pile. Now when you start dealing with the bigger piles of brittle grass, you're definitely going to need to start pulling the trigger in and getting more power, especially if you have a wet grass mixed in with the brittle grass. Now when you start dealing with wet grass, you're really going to have to start using the high mode on the trigger. Now it works just fine without using the turbo button until you start getting it into a deeper pile. Once you start piling it up, you're definitely going to have to start using the turbo button, and you're going to have to use it constantly because that's just how wet grass is. It's wet and heavy. Now obviously you're probably not going to be using a blower like how I'm using the blower in the video. Most people use their blowers for cleaning up dead leaves or cleaning off the sidewalk. But I don't have a sidewalk or dead leaves, so an empty horse corral with grass clippings is the best I had available to demonstrate. Honestly, we really don't use a blower a whole lot like most people use their blowers. We use the blower for mainly cleaning up after the sheep because, quite honestly, using a rake to clean up after sheep is a nightmare, and the blower works way better. Although it does make for a little bit dustier environment for a little while. But enough about that. Let's get back to talking about how much power this blower has. Ryobi claims that it can deliver 550 CFMs of air moving power at 125 miles per hour in the way of air speeds. I'm not sure if it can actually do that. It is fairly powerful, so it might get fairly close. Just keep in mind that these numbers come from testing facilities and laboratories where all the conditions are perfect, and honestly in real life it's just never that easy. It'll depend a lot on what size battery you're using, how hot it is outside, and other factors. Now power-wise, compared to the previous blower I reviewed, the Ryobi RY40480 40v blower, which is the brushed model, it's really not that much of a noticeable increase in power. I think it is a little bit more powerful, but it's not really something where it's like, oh wow, this is so much better. It's more like, well, I guess that's nice, but it's not really that big of a deal. So if it's really not that much more powerful than the brushed version, what is the benefit of getting the brushless version? Well, I think Ryobi seems to think that the big selling point is that it is quieter. Ryobi has gone as far as to create a series called the Whisper series, which includes an 18-volt brushless blower, a 40-volt brushless blower, the one I'm reviewing right now, and then the 40-volt backpack brushless blower, which is a tank and I actually owned briefly and I didn't like, and so it got returned because it just was not very good and it weighed about 5,000 pounds. Honestly, I think this one is way superior. But back to this review. Noise-wise, I'd say that the brushless version is about as loud as the brushed version when the brushed version is being used in its high mode and the brushless version is being used in its turbo mode. So overall, the brushed version is a little bit louder and the brushless version is a little bit quieter. The brushless version has a more of a flat, less distinctive noise, and the 40-volt brushed version has a higher, whinier noise, which makes it a little bit more noticeable and definitely more annoying. So overall, I think it is a good selling point, but not as big as one as Ryobi was hoping. However, what isn't a good selling point is the runtime. The runtime on this blower is about 24 minutes. Now, that's still fairly good, and it's not a bad runtime. However, with the brushed 40-volt version, I was getting about 30 minutes of runtime. Keep in mind that this is when you're using it on high without pressing the turbo button at all. If you use a lower setting, you'll get a longer runtime, and if you use it with the turbo button a lot, you'll get a shorter runtime, so just keep that in mind. But overall, the brushed version has a longer runtime with the 4 amp hour batteries. So if you're looking for something with a longer runtime, the brushed version will probably give you a better runtime. And if you're looking for one that has a quieter, more powerful motor, I'd say this would be your choice. Now let's talk a little bit about the ergonomics and weight. Weight-wise, the brushless 40-volt blower weighs a little bit under 10 pounds with a 4 amp hour battery, and getting it to balance to get the weight was not an easy task if you can't tell from the picture. So if you compare the brushed model to the brushless model, you'll see that the brushed model weighs roughly about 3/4 of a pound less than the brushless model. So overall, the brush model is lighter and the brushless model is a little bit heavier. Form factor wise, the brush model is definitely smaller than the brushless model. The brushless model, well, to put it politely, it looks a little bit overweight and probably should stop eating at McDonald's. Overall, I think I like the form factor of the brush model more than I like the form factor of the brushless model. However, the brushless model does have a better design. One of the things that the brushless model does better than the brushed model is the air intake guard. The air intake guard on the brushless model overall has a better design and will prevent your clothing from getting stuck to it more often than, say, with the brushed model. Another difference is the blower tube. The blower tube on the brushless model is a little bit longer and will make it a little bit easier to control the air and where it's going. And the last and probably most important improvement on the brushless model is the knob and bolt that hold the handle in place. If you watched my video on the brushed 40-volt blower, you'll understand that I absolutely hate and despise the method Ryobi took with that blower's handle securement knob. The design they went with on the brushless model is a better design, it's stronger, and it will be easier to find parts for if something does end up happening. So I'm glad they changed the design and didn't keep up with the same design they had on the brushed model, because that was just a stupid design. Now this blower's trigger is a variable speed trigger with 7 different speeds, not including the turbo button. But honestly, it seems more like 3 speeds because the trigger is just not very well designed. It's kind of laggy and jittery, and it doesn't engage until you pull the trigger in about halfway, and then after that there's so little spacing between the different speeds that you go right over one without even noticing it, and you actually have to work consciously in order to get to another speed. It's not very well user-friendly, honestly. So I'd say it's more like a low, medium, high turbo button kind of blower. Okay, now let's talk about some of the pros and cons of this blower. 40-volt power. Like I've said before, I really do think 40-volt batteries are about the right weight to price ratio for these yard tools, and honestly, for blowers and trimmers, I think they work great. Being brushless means that you'll have the higher power to weight ratio, and also there will be less maintenance required. And you can tell all your friends that you own this brushless tool, which was more expensive than their brush tool. Quieter. This blower is way quieter than a gas blower, and it is a little bit quieter than a brushed blower. So if you're like me and love to blow out your garage or your sidewalks at 3 a.m. in the morning and not wake up your neighbors, unless you enjoy waking up your neighbors, this may be a good blower for you. Lighter than gas. This blower is definitely lighter than a gas blower, and the amount of power it puts out is fairly substantial. Is it as powerful as a gas blower? No. Is it almost as powerful? Yes. And overall, without having to deal with the vibrations that a gas engine puts out or the maintenance a gas engine requires, I'd say this is definitely well worth the cost of the battery and the blower. Powerful. This blower has quite a bit of power behind it, and I think it'll be able to handle just about every job in your yard that requires a blower. And honestly, the only job I think it would probably struggle with would probably be with wet leaves, but honestly, most blowers have a problem with that unless you're dealing with a commercial grade gas blower. So I think this will be able to handle most of those tasks that you do around your yard, like blowing regular leaves, moving dust and debris, fending off tear gas grenades, flying your kite when there's no wind, or just annoying your relatives. I think you'll do a fairly good job. And first in the meh category, we have bulky. It's not as heavy as a gas blower, but it's also not as light as the brushed 40 volt version of this blower. So honestly, I wish it was a little bit lighter, but it's still not a big deal. Trigger. The trigger on this blower is not very smooth. It's a little bit, I don't know, gummy or laggy, or I don't know. It's just not a smooth experience, and you have to pull it in about halfway before it activates the blower, leaving not much room to get between the 7 different modes. So like I said earlier in the video, it really is more of a 3 mode plus the turbo button blower. Turbo. The turbo button is, as usual, a gimmicky kind of thing, and honestly I really wish the power was incorporated into the trigger, but then Ryobi would have less marketing material for a blower. And so we have the turbo button. I really wish they would go the way of the dinosaur or common sense, but for now we're stuck with them. Runtime. The runtime on this blower isn't bad, but it's still not as good as what I was getting with the brushed model. The brushed model from Ryobi, I was getting about 6 minutes longer runtime than what I was able to get with this model, which is brushless. Usually when you hear the word brushless, you assume that you're going to be getting slightly more power and a longer runtime. At least that's what I usually assume, because that's what most of the marketing hype I've seen says. But in reality, I don't think Ryobi's using the latest and greatest brushless technology, and so I think that's really evident in the performance here. It's not the most expensive blower on the market, but at the same time, it's not the cheapest either, and honestly, I was expecting more from this blower than what I got in the way of runtime. At the end of the day, I really do recommend this blower. I enjoyed using it, and I do think it has a superior design to the 40 volt brush model. I don't like the form factor as much as the brushed 40 volt model, but I do think the design choices that they chose with this model is better. Now, if you're coming from a gas blower, I do think that you'll be fairly happy with this blower. No, it's not as powerful as a gas blower, but at the same time, you'll have less of those irritations that you have with a gas blower, like the vibrations, which will make you feel like you've developed some sort of strange disease, or having to go to the gas station when you've run out of gas and you're not done with your job yet, and the broom honestly is just an irritation and you don't know where it's at, or with the fact that you'll be able to just start your job right away with this and not have to struggle with getting it started. Overall, I really do recommend this blower, and this is a blower I'm planning on keeping. And I think we've reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. God bless.